Hey guys, David Doty with Call It Closed International Realty, working from home this Monday afternoon, and I wanted to do a quick video to talk about what you're gonna do the first time you're making an offer on a property as a new agent. Say you're a buyer's agent, we provide you with Op City leads and with Prime Street leads. You might get a lead from your own sphere. When it's time to go and make an offer, you've looked through. You've showed your buyer client a few properties. You've already got a buyer's agency signed with them, and it's time to write an offer. How do we do that? So let's go through the North Carolina offer to purchase and talk about it. So you're also going to get a sneak peek on what app files looks like, which is super cool. This is our online filing system. If you can get app files, if you're not with Call It Close, I think they charge about 130 something dollars a month, but for our agents, it's included. So I clicked on create new app file, and this pops up. It's a new. So I'm going to name it 123 Main Street, and I'm going to say test and see. Okay, and then the file type, it's a buyer. All right. So here I'm going to put. Let's assume it's a single family home with an HOA. My name is David Doty. The buyer name is Ed Smith, let's say. Closing date, we're going to shoot for November 30th, 2020. MLS is going to be 333333. Referral type, so this would be if I did receive a referral, but it's not a referral. The seller name, I'm going to call her Alice Smith. And the transaction type, it is residential. Okay. Any other notes you want to add, you put in there. And what's cool about app files, every time you can go into your app files, your main page, and you just type in whatever you're looking for. Let's say you can't remember the exact address, but you look at, it's on Main Street. You just type in Main, and this and many others app files will pop up if you have others with Main. So you can type in Ed Smith, or even type in your own name, and it's going to bring up the app files with your name in it. So it's pretty cool. It's really easy. Here you can select other agents in the office if you've got a co-buyer's agent, or if you've got a team leader that you want to keep in the loop. And then I am going to be notified, as well as our CEO and our awesome administrator out in Texas. So we create the app file, and boom, you've got it. So here we've got this. And you can upload documents. You can do all these different things. Pretty cool. And I'm going to add forms. And the first thing I'm going to add is scroll down. So it's what I love, that we have all of the North and South Carolina forms are already here for agents who are licensed in both states. And we've got, so here we go to North Carolina. This is for listings, and then buyer forms needed. So here's the offer to purchase and contract, but we're also going to do the buyer's agency agreement. We're also got to make sure that we have the working with real estate agents brochure in there. So I'm going to just hit plus, and the offer to purchase. Okay. And then hopefully you've already got this working with real estate agents brochure filled out and the buyer's agency agreement filled out, but maybe you just got this lead this afternoon and it's a hot market and you needed to jump out there and get it. So we're just going to go out there and hit it. You hit that, it brings up the forms. And so here, this is the working with real estate agents brochure, which you need to go over with your client at first substantial contact. Here you would type in your name, license number, firm name, and date. Here you type in the buyer's name. And then one cool thing about app files is you can actually sign it right here. So if the buyer's with you and you got your laptop, you pull over to a coffee shop, and you can do this together with the buyer. You type in their name and they can sign it just like that. Click the accept box and boom, it's signed. For the buyer agency agreement, again, this is important. You want to put in the date, you put in the buyer's name, and then you're going to put in the firm name. Okay. This is not your personal agency agreement. In North Carolina, the agency agreements are always with the firm. With my spelling and capitalization. So it's a residential. Now, this is in, what did I say, Test, North Carolina. So the general location, I'm going to put Test, NC. If it were real, it would be Charlotte or Cabarrus County or Mecklenburg, or maybe sometimes you have a buyer's agent who's like, you know what, you're an expert in Moss Creek. I know you live in that area. There's 1,500 homes. You know Moss Creek like the back of your hand. If I buy a house in Moss Creek, I'm going to use you. But you know what? I don't have a personal allegiance to you. My sister is a real estate agent in Charlotte. And if I don't buy in Moss Creek, then I am going to use my sister as a realtor. So then you'd have to be very specific and say, this buyer agency is just for Moss Creek. The term of the agreement, it must have a clear beginning and ending. So you have to make sure that you put in the dates. You have to fill all this stuff in. Now, the compensation of the firm, when you're doing a buyer agency agreement specific to a listing that's already in the MLS, and like I just happen to be helping an agent with this, make an offer on this property, it pays 2.5% of that purchase price, whatever purchase price you agree on. It's not a lot of money. So when I go to the buyer's agency agreement, I'm going to type in 2.5%. Okay, does that make sense? So one thing, App Files does 5 pages at a time, and since I put all these documents into one, it's a 25 page. So we go to click on 6 through 10. If within blank days after expiration, so if you show this buyer the house and you have this buyer agency agreement and they don't buy it during the term and your agency agreement expires, this protects you in the event that they decide, okay, agreement expired on November 30th, and now I'm going to go in there and buy the house, and the seller is going to drop the price by 2.5 or 3%. So you put in within 10 days, within 30 days, within 90 days. If the buyer proceeds with the purchase, it protects you to make sure that you still get paid and that your firm still gets paid. Typically, when you're making an offer, you want to go over with the buyer the offer to purchase and contract so that they understand the form that they're signing, that they're making the offer on this property. You want to make sure that they understand about home inspections. And if you don't go over these, that's totally fine, but you probably should. And if you do, you check these boxes. A lot of times home warranty companies will give a kickback to the agent. And so if you refer Home Warranty of America or some other firm, they might write you a check for $25 as a realtor. That's totally fine if you want to do that. But if you do, you need to disclose it to your buyer, okay? Confidential, any additional provisions that you need to know of, note them. If not, just put in not applicable or NA. Hello. Save changes. Now, this is an important one, understanding agency. So if you, now remember these forms, these agreements are between the buyer client and the firm. And so if this listing that you are bringing the buyer to is listed by another agent in your firm, technically that creates a dual agency relationship where the firm is representing both the buyer and the seller. And that's only acceptable if the buyer and the seller are made aware of that and they agree to it. So you would have your buyer initial one of these 3 boxes. The top one is authorizing the firm to act as a dual agent to represent both buyer and seller. And again, this only applies if the listing is also through the firm. This is, the second box is that the buyer desires exclusive representation at all time, saying, no, I don't trust you to represent me and the seller. You can't possibly do that fairly. Now, in this digital age, you can you can represent a buyer and a seller, two different agents in the same firm. A lot of times they've never even met because they could be in different offices. They could be in different parts of the state. They could be specialists in different things. And with us being an online brokerage, it's not like we're having regular staff meetings where everybody comes in on Tuesday morning to talk about their problems. So that doesn't apply too much anymore, but it could. The other one would be a designated agent option. And that's, let's say the listing agent is doing an open house and a buyer comes in and they're unrepresented and they say, I want my own realtor, but I don't want it to be you, Mr. Listing Agent. Well, in that case, the listing agent would notify the broker in charge, who in this case is me, and I would appoint a buyer's agent to represent that buyer. And we assure the buyer that the buyer's agent and the listing agent will not be colluding. They're not going to be looking at each other's notes or anything like that. Everybody's information is protected. And that's pretty much it. Come down to the signature page. Now, somebody did ask the question earlier. So this is the buyer. What do you do on this entity buyer? And this line is for if the person is buying it for an investment and they're putting it in the name of their LLC, or if it is a company, let's say you represent Walmart on buying vacant land to open new Walmart stores. Well, congratulations, first of all. But secondly, you would have Walmart, or whatever the official name is of their company that's buying the land, would go in this section. So you only need one of these two. You don't have to have the buyer and the entity buyer. It's one or the other. And then, of course, we've pre-filled this that came from the first page. Type in your firm license number, phone number, office address, and you sign it. Now, for call it closed agents, I want you guys to use the corporate headquarters address in Naples, Florida. Don't use our personal North Carolina address, because when checks get mailed, you want them to go to corporate so that you can get paid quicker, okay? And now we're getting into the actual offer to purchase and contract. So type in the seller's name. I said that was Atlas Smith, right? The street address of the property. And just to save time, I'm not going to do all of this. You fill in all the blanks. When you go to the MLS and you're completing these, you can find all of this stuff either in the MLS or in the realist property tax report. So you click on this button, the realist property link, and it brings up this new tab, and it has all of the information that you're going to need. Okay, characteristics, when the house was built, all these things. You scroll down, the last market sale in history. It tells you the deed book and page and what kind of deed there was. And I'd also like you guys, when you're creating your file, you go the extra step and you pull the deed. You get the whole package. And I'd also really encourage you to do a comparative market analysis to determine a good sales price of what the house is likely to appraise for. Because if you don't do that, and you have your buyer pay too much for a house and it doesn't appraise, your buyer's going to be out of a lot of money, and you could actually be liable. It's very important that you do your homework and you educate your buyers and don't let them make bad mistakes. So the purchase price, we're in a tough seller's market right now. It is tough for buyers. It's good for sellers. Prices are up and sellers are getting to pick and choose. So before you make that offer, call the listing agent, call them and say, what is your seller looking for? Do they want amenable terms? Do they want to be able to rent the house back after closing? Be careful about doing that. But do they want to close in 2 months or in 21 days? Do they want a high price? Tell us what they want. How can we structure this deal to make it attractive for your sellers? A lot of times a listing agent will tell you and give you some good tips to help you get your offer accepted. So here you would put in the purchase price. Let's say it's $200,000. Now, due diligence is the amount of money that the buyer, excuse me, is paying the seller to take the home off the market. If I'm a listing agent, I'm advising my sellers, I want that due diligence money to be as high as possible, because that is money that goes straight to the seller, that they can cash that check and go out to eat. They can buy new shoes. They can make a car payment, whatever they want to do. But you want that to be as high as possible. Typically, it's going to be on a $200,000 home. It might be $500,000. It might be $2,000. It really depends on the liquidity of the buyer and how flexible they are. And it depends a lot on the condition of the home as well. If the home looks relatively new and it was well maintained and it's a nice house, I'm less concerned about horrible issues coming up. And so I'm willing to have my buyer put down more money. Now, if the house is 40 years old and it looks like the roof's leaking and the air conditioner looks like a bucket of rust, I might make an offer with zero due diligence, because I want to get that inspector in there and find out what we're really getting into and make sure that my buyer actually does want this home. We're doing our due diligence during the due diligence period. Earnest money is another deposit that the buyer puts up right now, but it's going to be held in escrow, typically by the closing attorney. And the closing attorney is going to hold that money. And if the buyer walks away after the due diligence date runs out, when due diligence expires, then the seller is supposed to get that money. If the buyer walks away during the due diligence period, the buyer is supposed to get the due diligence money back. So let's just say this buyer is putting $1,000 down in due diligence and $2,500 for earnest money. Now, 200 minus 3,500 is 196,500. Let's not leave any blanks. I got two. Hit a fat finger down there. Escrow agent is going to be our preferred closing attorney in North Carolina, Shepherd Law, the amazing Shepherd Law PLLC. Now, ultimately, the buyer gets to choose, but most buyers don't have an attorney in their pocket that they're already comfortable with, so they're going to depend on you to refer them to somebody. Now, the due diligence period, again, what kind of deal are we doing here? Let's assume, because most deals are, let's assume that this buyer is getting a mortgage, okay? Most buyers are. Cash deals are a little bit different. If it's a cash deal and this guy's a real estate investor and he's not having a home inspection done, we could do a 7-day due diligence. But the average buyer typically is hiring a company to come out and do a home inspection. And the average buyer is also getting a mortgage, so they're going to need an appraisal done. So typically, the buyer is going to need 21 to 28 days to perform all of their due diligence comfortably. And most sellers are going to be okay with that. Now, not always, but generally speaking. So let's say today is October 19th. We'll just say 11/17/2020. Make sure it's not a Sunday or a Saturday, unless you like working weekends. The settlement date typically is going to be 2 weeks after. Not always, it could be 1 week. Let's make it 11/24. I hope that's not Thanksgiving, but I'm not going to take a look right now. Items leased or not owned. Now, this would be a satellite dish, a security system, invisible fencing system, something that the seller has told the listing agent and it's in the MLS. And in the MLS, they're saying the invisible fence is not going to convey with the purchase of the home. You would note that item here. Let's say the invisible fence will not go with the house. Other items that do not convey. Now, typically anything glued, screwed, bolted, or otherwise permanently attached or intended to be permanently attached to the home is supposed to go with the home. Would that include TV wall mounts? Yeah, I mean, they're bolted to the house. So typically the TV wall mount should go with the home. But a lot of sellers are saying, I am taking that thing. I paid $125 for it and it fits my TV perfect. So they're planning to take it. You need to note that here, that those things will not convey. It needs to be in the contract. And a lot of times, if you don't put this in as the buyer's agent, if the listing agent notices, they should, if they're doing their job, they would say, oh, my seller said he's taking the TV wall mount that's in the living room. That would go there. Personal property are things that should not normally convey. They're not required to convey with the property, such as a refrigerator or a washer and dryer. If your buyer wants the washer and dryer and refrigerator or some combination thereof, or the riding lawnmower or something else, I've seen people say, I've got to have those bar stools in the kitchen. You would put those here on that line, okay? Page 16, moving on down. This is where you disclose what kind of financing the buyer is doing. So the buyer does need to get a loan or does not intend to obtain a loan. The buyer is doing a down payment assistance or something else. What kind of financing are they getting? Put all those details in here. And so what does this tell you? Before you go to write an offer, you need to have had these conversations with your buyer. And you're also going to need to get a pre-qualification letter to submit with this offer. Because if I'm a listing agent and you send over an offer to purchase that says you're going to pay $200,000 for the house, and you're putting $10,000 down and financing 190, okay? I need a letter from your lender or from your buyer's lender that's saying, I am able to qualify for a loan for 95% loan to value for the purchase of this home. So go ahead and get that stuff done do it before you're even out there showing houses, guys. It's very important. Don't waste your time. If the buyer does need to sell their home in order to qualify for that new mortgage, or does not, check the box. If they do, put in that property address, okay? Your residential property disclosure and mineral oil gas rights, any other disclosures that are required are typically going to be in the MLS. You just click this tab right here that says 2 attachments, and look, property disclosure, mineral oil gas rights is right there. Great. So you download those and can put them into the app file and have your buyer sign them when you're making the offer. Okay. Seller representation, if they've owned the house for a year, less than a year, does not yet own the property. If they're a real estate investor that's assigning their contract. If it's prior to 1978, you need that lead-based paint. This is information for the homeowners association. The buyer needs to know where this homeowners association is and what they charge and what they do. This would be where you put your buyer's name, or if they're buying the house and putting it into the name of a trust, the Ed Smith Family Trust, that's what you would put. This is right here. This is instructions to the attorney on how to prepare the deed. And then if your buyer is tight on cash and the seller is amenable and you make a really good offer, you ask for closing costs, you would put that here. So we'll pay you full price, but give us $5,000 at closing to help cover some of our closing costs. And a lot of times sellers are willing to do that if everything else on the deal looks good. If you are asking for the seller to pay for a home warranty, you would select that here. If the buyer needs a place to live right now and the house is empty and the seller agrees, the buyer would take possession before closing and you would attach a form for that. They're typically going to pay rent to the seller for that. Sometimes the seller's like, okay, we can close on it next week, but I need 3 weeks to move. And then there's an option of that. If there is a tenant involved that the house is currently rented, you would check that box. And all of these others are addendums that typically don't apply. But again, if the house is built prior to 1978, lead-based dependent. If you got a FHA or VA loan, you need to use that addendum. Have your buyer sign it. I always like to try to get the listing agent on the phone. So once your buyer has signed all of these necessary forms, call up that listing agent and say, I'm sending you an offer. It's going to be in your mailbox. Try to build rapport. Make that agent want to work with you because you're such a nice person and you're professional. It's important on this last page or second to last page that you put in the firm license number, mailing address. Again, guys, for call it closed agents, put in the Naples, Florida headquarters address. Don't put in the North Carolina or the South Carolina office, because that when the commission checks go out at closing, if the check comes to me or whatever your local office is, it's going to be delayed. So make sure if you're in another state, follow instructions from your broker. Okay. I hope this was helpful, guys. Again, it's just a quick primer. If you have other questions about what to do after you get your first deal under contract, give me a call. In North Carolina, my number is 704-780-3084. You can even text me, comment on the video below if it was helpful. That's all I want. I just want it to be beneficial to you guys. Thank you all. Take care. See you soon.